Well, it's summertime and we're beginning a new series and we're doing it different this year. I hope it's not too much change happening around here. I know that we moved the pulpit from over here to over here, and we're not trying to throw you too far off balance that way. I love the Proverbs. I don't know about you, but some of those sayings, when you read them the first time, they kind of, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the next one is like, what? You just kind of look at them and hard to understand. And, they're kind of cute little sayings that we've likely all heard at one time or another. But what are they? What are these things called Proverbs? And what do they mean anyway? Like these two here. Anybody got a clue what is illustrated here? Anyone? Rika, I'm told these are Dutch proverbs that have made it into the English language. What do they mean? What's the first one? Anyone? Got a guess? Yeah? Fighting. Yeah, fighting. Well, first one, every dog has its day. So what does that mean anyway? Is it true? Every dog has its day? Does it stand to reason, or is it just wishful thinking? What does it mean, every dog has its day? What do you think? What's that mean? Every dog has its day. Sometimes you have bad days and several bad days in a row, but every dog's got its day. You get the bone after a while, I guess. Well, that's pretty clear. It's an encouragement to just keep going, because eventually, supposedly, you'll succeed. Or at least end up with a bone. And I guess that was success for this month. But as for being true, that has to be defined by one's own perspective, I suppose. Well, how about that second image there? What do you think this one is? Ah, very good. We got a winner there. You can't see the forest for the trees. Yeah, did you get that? Yeah. Or were you too bogged down with other elements on the page? That's a hint, anyway. A hint of what its meaning is supposed to be. So what does it mean? You can't see the forest for the trees. Some people have said that to me, and I'm going, huh? What do you mean? I can see the forest. There's lots of them there. How many detail people do we have here? Come on, admit it. You're into details. You really like the details. Yeah. You're really good with the details, but you get lost when we start talking about the big picture. Does that kind of sound like you? You can't see the forest for the trees. Those details just keep getting in the way. There's too many details about it. Well, how about one more? Let's see, what does this one mean? Oh, come on, I did too easy of one, right? I was going to say Anna will know this one for sure, because, she loves horses. Yep. Let's see, we have this smiley face, a wagon and a horse coming to see. I know. It's best to be up in the wagon when the horses are loose, lest you get kicked. No, that's not quite it either. Yeah, of course, it's the cart before the horse. So what? What does that mean? What difference does it make? Well, just ask anyone here who's put the cart before the horse any time in their life. Have you ever done that? Yeah, this one means we do better when we put things in their proper order. Things will likely work better, or at least make more sense. And besides, the cart isn't going anywhere soon. Know what I mean? Yeah, you put that cart before the horse, it just stands there. You know, Proverbs, they can help us to make light of some difficult situations at times and help us to actually learn from others' mistakes. That sounds like kind of a good thing. How many of you feel like you could use a little more wisdom in your day-to-day life? Yeah, I think we're all in that boat, aren't we? Or maybe you've heard yourself say, if I'd only known then what I know now, things would be different. Yeah. Speaking about that, Graham, did you remember to put the audio back on? All good. See, I was going to mention that first thing, but They say hindsight is 20/20. And actually, both of those things are what we would call modern-day proverbs, right? Here's some more that appeared as I was writing this message. I had my email turned on again. I got to remember, turn that thing off. Anyway, they came from the MB Missions update that Randy Friesen sent out just after Carlin Weinhauer, Randy's mentor, had passed away. Randy writes, Carlin often said, prayer is the work of the kingdom. So our lead team began weekly fasting and prayer. Our staff team now spends the first 30 minutes of our workday in personal and corporate prayer. Carlin modeled what it meant to set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Another of his sayings was, we need fresh bread every day, especially if it's Grandma Martin's. That stuff's good, let me tell you. Fresh bread every day. Our staff began to read through the Bible every year and to life journal each morning. Let's keep big things big and little things little. The Word of God, prayer, and the gospel were big for Carlin. Most other things, they were little. I like this one. Let's not jump over the chasm twice or cut the cat's tail more than once. He writes, I know Carlin loved his cat, but we finally figured out what he was talking about was the need for leaders to be decisive when facing tough decisions and to make sure that they do it right the first time. You know, we hear and use proverbs of all sorts. They come up in the middle of movies, often quoted wrong or purposely miscued, I might add. But occasionally, the whole movie is a proverb in disguise. There is a lesson to be learned, but is it wisdom? Or at least, whose wisdom is it? Or is it just perhaps, one of those cute sayings that we've grown to like over the years? As we journey throughout this summer and into the fall, we'll push the pause button on Acts and take a journey into the wisdom literatures of the Bible. Yes, it's once again time for our Summer in the Psalms series, but this year we will not only wade through the Psalms, we'll also wander into this book of Proverbs as well. And who knows, we might even see Job or Ecclesiastes or the Song of Solomon. They could also make cameo appearances throughout the summer. I've entitled this series, Begin with Wisdom. In keeping with this year's theme, it'll be more devotional in nature for the most part. And by that I mean, what did God show me as I went through the biblical passage? Kind of that life journaling that was talked about, that Carlin insisted upon. I won't be using too many third-party sources other than when I get stumped, and frankly, I get stumped enough, so there'll be a few. So it'll be more like a prayer journal than a theological paper. That said, though, for today I wanted us to start the series with a proper introduction to the book of Proverbs. I feel it's always best to begin with some understanding of the authors and their intentions so we do not wander too far down those rabbit trails that can actually corrupt wisdom and not bring it. Dr. Bill Long said, "We live our lives between Job and Proverbs. We live between times of calamity and hardships that Job expresses so poignantly, and the rest of life where prudence and wisdom are wrought in the fires of our Job-like experiences. Proverbs teach us, or at least seek to teach us, how to manage our day-to-day life with simple, easy-to-remember truths. This, in some ways, I suppose, helps us to avoid more Job-like experiences and enjoy what God has created us to do. Proverbs is actually a very practical book. Really. For those who are pragmatic and not particularly interested in the why questions of life, those that Job's literature helps to address, those why questions, Proverbs help us to understand how one thing kind of leads to another, which, by the way, is another proverb. How about that? Since the wisdom in the Proverbs give us practical advice helping us to avoid many of life's pitfalls, this ought to make the book of Proverbs one of the most important reads for every person on planet Earth, especially Christians. Wouldn't you agree? Truth be known, wisdom is one of the most valuable, and some would go so far as to say the most valuable commodities for mankind. It's worth more than any material thing that you would choose to acquire in this life. And in fact, as Dr. Long points out in his introduction to Proverbs, if you were to turn to the center of the book of Proverbs, the very center of it, you would read, "How much better to get wisdom than gold, to choose understanding rather than silver." Yeah, that's really right in the very center of the book. Look it up sometime. It's Proverbs 16:16. No matter where you are on life's journey, gaining wisdom is actually a choice. God gave us freedom to choose what is wise or to live with what is foolish. As one reaches the final lap in life, the things that took so much toil to acquire are cast aside as meaningless, a chasing after the wind, as the book of Ecclesiastes say. And yet, if you're still breathing, you still have time to grasp onto and gain even more wisdom. And even to pass that on to others, as Carlin apparently did. What will people say you used to say? What will be those little quips that they remember that came out of your mouth? Will it be wise or foolish? Dr. Bruce Watkian, commenting on the purpose of the book of Proverbs, reminds us that the Hebrew word yada, translated by the NASB and King James Version to know wisdom, or that men may know wisdom and instruction, that's the RSV, ought to be translated for gaining wisdom. For this is the purpose of the book. In the English, we can intellectually know something without having experienced it or put it into practice. But the word in the Hebrew, that word yada, is best understood as coming to know something, even through experience. It's a deep knowledge of it. Therefore, Proverbs isn't simply to know about the subject of wisdom, but rather to grow in wisdom as we read and put it into practice. We can put into practice the sage advice given through its pages. We can read it and eat it. Dr. Rocky also comments that we should use today's New International Version of the Bible as we study this book, as it more accurately reflects the author's intention, as is shown in verse 2, which reads, "For gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding the words of insight." I'll refer to several translations as we go along, comparing their chosen words to help us to grasp the truth even better. Which is the usual way, actually, I read the Bible, whether for study or for devotion. Seldom do I ever read it in just one version. Seems I need several translations, actually, to know what the author has said at times. But even so, knowing what they have said is still not yet. You gain in wisdom first by hearing, and then by putting what you've heard into practice, or by seeing what you've missed out on because you ignored the truth. Either way, you'll gain wisdom. The choice is up to you. Do you want to learn it the hard way? Or a slightly easier way? So according to verse 2, there is truly something for you to gain as you take this journey with me throughout the summer. How cool is that? Seems that I've got the cart before the horse, though. Yep. There I go. I've missed verse 1 already, and that tells us whose wisdom it is that we're actually looking at here. If you look at Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1, you would read, actually, it's even in the margin before, the Proverbs of Solomon. We've shortened that today to just Proverbs in many translations. So in your Bible, it may just say Proverbs at the top of the page. Perhaps that's because we know that some of them were written by other authors, and so, we've decided to just use the one. Regardless of the reasons, Solomon's name is actually appropriate as the man who collected these sayings, at least for the first 9 chapters. It is widely agreed upon that they're his. These are the ones he has collected. He was a very wise man. There's a story in the Bible that tells us why he was so wise. Solomon was offering sacrifices at Gibeon. The Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Solomon, you have been granted one request. Make it a good one." Well, actually, it was, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." And that's 1 Kings 3, verse 5. So it didn't even have to be a good one, frankly. He had one request. Sky's the limit. Well, actually, beyond the sky is the limit. God could grant him anything. And so what did this young man ask for? Well, here's a hint. It wasn't for riches untold, nor for another wife. Even by then he had plenty of those. Well, I kind of understand now. What he urgently required of God was for wisdom and understanding. 1 Kings 3 verse 9 says, "A discerning heart to govern and to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong." So to entitle this book as it was originally entitled in the Hebrew, Proverbs of Solomon, seems appropriate as he is the major contributing author to its content. Even the Greek text says that it is his. Proverbs of Solomon. But somehow when those Latin folks got a hold of it, the name was shortened to Liber Proverbium. Did I say that right, Margie? Proverbium? Yeah, something like that. She's much better in that Latin stuff. Liber, that's book. We get our word library from it, which is a collection of books, right? So the book of Proverbs. And nowadays, like I said, it's been shortened in most Bibles to just Proverbs. Why the shortening, you might be wondering? Well, I don't think it was because people were trying to censor Solomon, nor was it that Solomon, with more than 1,000 wives and concubines, was seen less than the wisest man on earth. And so then some monks later on said, can't have his name on the top of something that's supposed to be wisdom. No, I don't suspect it was that. But we'll see as we go through the book of Proverbs that it's actually written by more than just Solomon. And I suppose they didn't want any misrepresentation, and even the Hebrew rabbis, for the most part, refer to Proverbs as the book of wisdom. One thing we can be sure of is the fact that Solomon had a great deal of influence on its pages. But we should also understand that the wisdom contained herein was more than one man's opinion. So if you have your Bible along with you, let's begin today with the first 7 verses that are intentionally a preamble to the book. Here's what Solomon declares, and I'll read it from the TNIV. Their heading is Purpose and Theme. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the saying and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The book begins with a statement that attributes the book to Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. His name is again repeated in chapter 10, verse 1, and chapter 25, verse 1, indicating that those sections are also his authorship. But other authors are also mentioned. There are the 30 sayings of the wise. You find those in chapter 22, 17 to 24, verse 22. And further sayings of the wise, 24, verses 23 and to 34. In addition, we're told that the men of Hezekiah, apparently scribes, were responsible for copying the section from chapter 25 right to 29. And Agur, the son of Jacob, was responsible for doing chapter 30, while King Lemuel wrote chapter 31, 1 to 9. The author of the epilogue, chapter 31, 10 to 31, is unknown, unless it too originated with King Lemuel's mother. Verse 3 goes on to expand the purpose for which Solomon chose to write these things down. He said it was for receiving instruction in prudent behavior. So it's going to affect what we do. Doing what is right and just and fair. Wisdom is twofold. It is truth that can be passed on, but must also be passed on truth that has been received. Our law books in this land have mountains of laws that are held to be true and enforceable. They can be enforced so long as a judge knows which law pertains to the matter at hand. Knowing it, he can pass judgment. The lawyers in our land seek to persuade the judge as to what is the truth in the given situation. Oftentimes, the defense sees it one way, the prosecution yet another. But who is right? Or is there actually two truths? That's where wisdom shines, or at least we hope it will. Sometimes it doesn't. Wisdom seeks only the truth, but not only the truth. It seeks what is both prudent, just, and fair. This is what Solomon was trying to pass on to those who would take over for him, and even those whom he had empowered to do so during his reign. It is well illustrated in the case of the baby with two moms. Some of you may not even know what I'm talking about. This happened not long after Solomon had asked God for wisdom to rule. And so God granted him this amazing wisdom, and it was kind of proof, positive, that God had answered that prayer. Let me read it to you. It's found in 1 Kings, which is the first part of your Bible, a few books in. 1 Kings 3:16 to 28. You can turn there and follow along if you want. 1 Kings 3:16 to 28. I think Anne's going to follow along up there too. Now 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One of them said, "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I had a baby while she was there with me. The 3rd day after my baby was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the 2 of us. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, your servant, was asleep. She put him by her breasts and put her dead son by my breast. The next morning I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw it wasn't my son that I had born." The other woman said, "No, the living one is my son. The dead one is yours." But the first one insisted, "No, the dead one is yours. The living one is mine." And so they argued before the king. You know, when I first read this story, I thought, I sure wouldn't want to be him. This was a no-win situation. Who is to know which of the ladies is actually telling the truth? There were no witnesses. No surveillance cams. No recorded footage, you can't just back up and say, "Oh yeah, there she is, that's what she's doing." No, it was just one woman's word against another. So what is the wise thing to do? What is the prudent and fair and just thing to do? Well, let's read on. The king said, this one says, "My son is alive and your son is dead." While the other one says, "No, your son is dead and mine is alive." The king said, "Bring me a sword." So they brought a sword for the king. He gave an order, "Cut the living child in 2 and give half to one and the other half to the other." There's wise, prudent, and fair for you. Well, where's the wisdom in taking yet another life? Would it be fair that both women have no children? Depends on how you define fair, right? The woman whose son was alive was filled with compassion for her son and said to the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." But the other said, "Neither I nor you should have him. Cut him in 2. Then the king gave this ruling: "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother." When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe, because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. It is to such a man that we have the wisdom recorded in the book of Proverbs. But not only a man's wisdom is recorded here. Remember where Solomon got it from. He could have asked for anything from God that day. anything at all. And yet he asked God for wisdom. So, he is the one that we're reading of. But here's something that strikes me. Solomon asked for God that day and was granted. And so can you, and so can I. In the New Testament, the Apostle James writes, "If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him." You say you need more wisdom for your day-to-day actions? There you go. I trust that as we go through the teachings of Solomon and the other wisdom literature, that you will be asking God to grant you more wisdom. And would you do me a favor? Ask God to send the pastor more of his wisdom, so I might bring you spirit-filled words to chew on throughout this whole summer. Walter, lead us in our closing.
Thank you, Pastor Blake, for that great introduction to the book of Proverbs. And yes, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. We could also say that the knowledge of God is the beginning of wisdom. And to know God, or to know Jesus as our friend, is also the beginning of wisdom. I will sing this song for you. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. Then after the second...